The Scottish Football Podcast
from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to BBC Scotland's daily football podcast with me, Jane Lewis. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe at BBC Sounds. In this episode, we continue looking ahead to tomorrow's Euro qualifier between Scotland and Georgia. We'll hear from the Scotland manager Steve Clarke and midfielder Stuart Armstrong, and we'll talk to former Scotland international Billy Dodds. We'll also touch on the news from Ross County today after they sacked their manager Malky Mackay. Well, first of all, let's turn our attentions to the national side, shall we? We'll hear from the Scotland manager first of all. Here's Steve Clarke on tomorrow's game.
Obviously we want to get back to winning ways. It's not very often the reign I've had, apart from the early stages, that we've had consecutive defeats like we've had recently. So it'd be nice to think that in the remaining two games we can pick up more points. I've always said that we want to get as high a points tally as possible, and two more games to try and do that. When you go away from home against a team like Georgia, it's going to be a difficult environment. It's going to be a difficult game for us because I think they're a very good side. The one game that they lost heavily was to Spain, and that's a little bit of an anomaly in the fixtures recently because all their games have been very competitive, and we expect another one tomorrow night. If we can go there and get a positive result, then it's only good for us.
Well, Billy, Steve Clarke there touching on the fact that it's not an easy place to come, Georgia. Do you concur with him? Are these the kind of tests that can always throw a little banana skin or two to Scotland teams?
I think it's been proven and factual, and that's why he's made that claim right away about the past troubles we've had against Georgia. The one thing I would say, Jane, is isn't it just nice where we can go there with no pressure? I think that'll help. We have got the injuries, but I expect still a good performance. But it's nice to go there without pressure. But it has been a bit of a graveyard in past games for us.
Yeah, you're talking about the defeats, obviously, in the Euro qualifiers in 2015 and 2007, where Scotland, of course, came unstuck out here in Georgia. But you can sense that there is a confidence and a belief and a good run of results, minus obviously the past three defeats, but a good run of results that Scotland should come here with confidence, Billy, don't you?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think you have to look at the calibre of opposition we've played in those three defeats, and we've stood up to them pretty well as well. We were competitive in every game, so maybe people say France, but the other two against Spain and England, we were certainly in it for long periods of time. But I think it'll be good to try and get back to winning ways as well, especially qualifying for the Euros, try to build that momentum going into them as well. Without that pressure, I think it's a big thing, the pressure, because as we've talked about in the past, going to Georgia under pressure, it's not been a great thing for us. But I think we'll handle this game pretty well, as we handled the likes of maybe Cyprus away as well. We handled those situations pretty well in the qualifying campaign.
You say there's no pressure, but I imagine there's a little bit of pressure coming from Steve Clarke, because the message from him is clear and simple. Yes, we've qualified, but we want to be ending this European campaign on a high. The players will be very, very aware of that message, won't they?
You'll always get that pressure, that demands from the manager. He'll be talking about, you've set a standard, don't let it slip. You know, when we're at our best and functioning properly, that we're capable of beating most teams, especially the likes of Georgia, in any other given day. So, yeah, the demands will be there, quite rightly so, from the manager, and I'm sure the players will take it on board. There's such a growth within this Scotland squad. It's been incredible to witness, and they really are in a good place mentally, physically, and even in terms of playing-wise as well, with some of the results I've got, even though we're on the back of those three defeats. There's
a lot of key players missing, isn't there? Obviously, there's no captain, Andy Robertson. Kieran Tierney's out. Shea Adams pulled out quite recently. There's no Angus Gunn in goal. Aaron Hickey is out. What do you think about the depth of the squad that Scotland have now, the players that they're going to have to call upon? Can they do just as good a job out there tomorrow night, do you think?
I think they've got to. I think the carrot of having the finals in Germany coming up has got to give those players that are on the fringe the carrot to make sure they perform well. And you're talking about the likes of the late call-up Lawrence Shankland getting an opportunity. I mean, if he gets a chance, or he starts, or he even comes on as part of the game, he's got to hit the ground running. And the likes of Stuart Armstrong, where he's not been a regular under Steve Clarke, but I think players like him will get an opportunity, and he's got to perform, because if he doesn't, he won't stake his claim for the final squad going to Germany. So Yeah, I think you'll get the edge out the players, Jane.
And that squad depth is also something that Steve Clarke has been speaking about.
No, I think over the course of my tenure, I've always tried to look a little bit deeper. There'll be some squads like this one, where you have a number of players missing, but there's a chance for someone else. I always say it's a chance for someone else. So if everyone else can do better, it makes my selection more difficult going into next year. And the selection will be difficult. For me, I have to find the right 23 for next summer. For now, some boys are in the squad with a chance to make a big impression on not just me, but the rest of the staff and the rest of the country. So let's see how they perform in the game.
The big question is who's going to be in goal. Obviously, Angus Gunn has kind of made that position his own. He's out injured. So who would you put in goal, Billy, if you were the manager?
Between Kelly, he gave Kelly and Clarke a half each in the last game. I think he thinks beyond Stevie Clarke, doesn't he? He knows he might have a problem. Obviously, with Craig Gordon missing out with his long-term injury, and then Angus Gunn picking up that injury. It's nice to give, especially goalkeepers, that specified position a little go, and he did that in the last game. I think you might start with Kelly. I think that's the way he'll go. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think anybody can outguess Stevie Clarke at times. So I'm thinking Kelly might just get the nod to start this one.
Well, Steve Clarke is taking charge of his 50th match as Scotland manager, and one player this afternoon has been talking about his influence.
I think it speaks for itself. I think since he's come in, I think we've gone from strength to strength. I think there's a real consistency about the team and the way we perform and find results. So I think his influence, on the Scotland national team has been significant, hugely positive. He's created an atmosphere here where players want to come and play. They enjoy it, but ultimately as well that it's a place where you can be successful and win games, and that's what everyone wants. I would say it's helped by the fact that a large proportion of the group have been together for a long time, and everyone's very familiar with each other. You've got some very interesting characters, funny characters that bring a lot to the group. It's a very relaxed atmosphere, but serious when it needs to be. I think the blend is really good, and I think that's amplified by the manager. Well,
Stuart Armstrong there waxing lyrical about the manager, Steve Clarke, and what he's done to kind of turn around Scotland's performances. He is a manager that's got a certain something, isn't he?
Yeah, proven, especially at Kilmarnock, what he built there. So he's got that steeliness. He knows what he wants to do. And I think it's been a thing of momentum for Scotland, because he knows where they were. They weren't in a brilliant place. He took charge, he regroups, and he builds that momentum, and that's what he's had to do. And then getting through that penalty shootout against Serbia just gave it growth, as I say. So it's been an ongoing thing. He knows how to build a real fortress, and I think that's what he's done with the Scotland squad. And then he's made players believe when they get there that they want to stay in the squad and want to turn up for whatever games, whether it's friendlies, whether it's competitive games. There's always a thing in the past with Scotland where some players just wouldn't be keen on joining squads. I think that's safe to say. So I think he's brought a real, you must turn up or you don't play, or you want other squads. So there's a real fear factor there as well, a real edge to the squad, and I think that's helped him along the way with that momentum, and especially beating Serbia to qualify for the last campaign. Looking in from the outside when I was in the game, it was brilliant to witness the way that this team has evolved, Jane.
He talks about his players developing and learning from all the experiences of playing on the big stage, if you like. He'll also learn as a manager as well, won't he? And he'll also grow and develop. Definitely,
even though he had all that experience beforehand. Every day's a learning day in football, absolutely, even for the likes of Steve Clarke. So, yeah, there have been hiccups along the way, but in the main, it's been success for Stevie and his squad, and under John Carver, who I know well, he's got a really good coaching team behind him as well. So it's been all positive for me. But I think what helps in that mood and that feeling is certainly qualifying for major tournaments, which is a thing that's been missing out for a lot of great Scotland managers in the last 20 years, but just haven't been able to go over the line. Stevie Clarke did that, and that buys belief from him, the players, his staff, and that's why it's a good place to be in this Scotland squad.
Let's turn our attention away from the national team just for a minute and talk about some big news in the Highlands today after Ross County sacked their manager, Malky Mackay. Was that a surprise to you, Billy?
Yes, it still was, because you know, Ross County, for me, survival is the key. And if they stay in the Premier League, I think it's a relative success. So I don't like to see any manager losing their job, and Malky has gone now. But yeah, it was a bit of a shock just in terms of they're still competitive. I know they're down the bottom, and that's when Roy can get a little bit twitchy. As you know, I know him well. So sitting joint bottom of the league, I think with St Johnstone beating them as well with the change of manager, I think has got Roy thinking.
You also know how it is to manage in the Highlands. What kind of attributes does a manager need to have to manage in that specific area of Scotland? Because it's not easy, is it, attracting players up to the north of Scotland? It has been a tricky time that the managers have spoken about quite openly when they've been managing up there.
Yeah, and I had that myself. You're quite right to point it out. But it's just part of the job. You know what, though, on the positive side, it's a brilliant place to manage. There's no doubt in the Highlands. A lot of teams don't like coming up that A9, but it's just the way it is, because Ross County and Inverness have to go down it every other week. So it is a brilliant place to manage. That's the positives. But it has its difficulties as well. And attracting players, you have to give them that little bit more, or they're not even interested in joining. I mean, 300, 400, 500 quid a week more, because if the likes of, no disrespect, your Motherwells, people like that, are in for them, St Johnstone's, then they don't have to come on another 2-3 hours up the road. But it's a brilliant place to manage as well.
Billy, will managers, I wonder, or potential managers for that job, be put off by what's happened to Malky Mackay? Because when you look at the run of results, minus the one against St Johnstone, which you mentioned there, you know, he was picking up points. He wasn't on a losing streak.
He wasn't. I watched their game against Hibs, their comeback when they were 2-0 down. It was a brilliant comeback, so it shows you there's a spirit there. They've got a good squad of players. Location-wise, it can put some managers off, but there's a lot of managers desperate to get back in the game as well. I think it would be a great place to manage for anybody who wants back in the game, with a good squad of players who probably are underperforming a little bit in terms of results, but they've been competitive, as we say. So it's an attractive job. And you know, Roy McGregor, there's always a bit of thought behind it. There's always plans in place when Roy makes a change. I don't see any different this time.
Would Billy Dodds make a return?
Jane.
It's a fair question though, isn't it? Come on, you live up there, you know the area.
What I would say, if Roy McGregor wanted me, he would be on the phone. So that's not been the case so far. He's only just out the job. So as I said, it's an attractive job. There's no doubt about it, but I've not even thought about it.
Billy, apologies for putting you on the spot. Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. Georgia against Scotland will be covered on Sportsound on the BBC Sports Scotland website. And of course, there will be TV highlights on BBC Scotland tomorrow night. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
The Scottish Football Podcast
from BBC Radio Scotland.